You can run from a place. You can run from a name. But you can't run from what already knows where you're going.
I'd lived in 3 different apartments, in 3 different cities, and in every single one of them, I had the same neighbor. Not the same kind of neighbor, not someone similar, the same man. The first time was in college. Cheap student housing, thin walls, everything smelling faintly of mildew. My neighbor was a quiet guy, middle-aged, which already made him stand out. Everyone else on that floor was barely 20. He introduced himself once. Carl. He didn't make small talk. He just watched. I'd catch him in the hall, standing outside his door like he'd been waiting for me to leave mine. Sometimes he'd ask vague questions, like, "You going out late?" or "Got people coming over?" But mostly, he just lingered. When I moved out a year later, I thought I'd never see him again. 2 years later, in a different city, I rented a studio apartment. I didn't even notice the neighbor across the hall at first, not until I came home late one night and saw him fumbling with his keys. Same build, same posture, same slow way of turning his head to look at me. And when he finally glanced up, the hallway light caught his face. It was Carl. I froze. He smiled faintly, like we'd bumped into each other by accident at the grocery store. "Small world," he said. That was it. That was all he said. I told myself maybe it wasn't him, just someone who looked a lot like him. But when I heard the way he cleared his throat through the thin walls, the exact same rasping sound from my college apartment, I knew. I moved again 6 months later. Different neighborhood, different landlord. I didn't even leave a forwarding address. The first night in my new place, I was unpacking boxes when I heard footsteps in the hall. A slow, dragging shuffle. I peered through the peephole and my stomach dropped. He was standing across the hall, unlocking the door. Same man, same stiff shoulders, and when he turned toward me, as if he could feel me watching, he smiled again. Guess we're neighbors. By the 4th time it happened, I stopped pretending it was coincidence. 3 different cities, 3 different leases, and every time I signed a new address, he was already there. Always across the hall. Always waiting. And last week, it happened again. Except this time, he moved in after I did. The difference this time was that I'd chosen the building myself, signed the lease in person, walked the halls before moving in. The unit across from mine was empty. I was sure of it. The manager had even joked, "That one's been vacant for months. No one sticks around long." So when the sound of boxes dragging woke me at 2 a.m., I knew something was wrong. I opened my door just a crack, and there he was. Carl, pushing a suitcase into the apartment across from mine, moving slowly, deliberately, like he wasn't carrying luggage but placing pieces of himself back where they belonged. I shut the door and locked it. My heart hammered, but there was something heavier pressing down on me. Not fear exactly, but inevitability. I had run 3 times. I'd left everything behind each time, and he always found me. Always across the hall. Days passed. He didn't knock, didn't speak, but I could feel him there. Sometimes I'd hear a faint scratching, like nails across the wall separating our apartments. Not constant, just once or twice a night, just enough to remind me he was there. Other times I'd hear him laugh, quietly, alone. And once, this was worse than all of it, I heard him say my name, softly, through the wall, like he was practicing it. I decided I needed to know what he wanted. So the next evening, when I heard him leave, I waited. watched through the peephole as he shuffled down the hall and disappeared into the stairwell. When the door across from mine clicked shut, I realized he hadn't locked it, just left it ajar. I don't know why I went inside. Curiosity, maybe, or something stronger. The pull of a question that had been growing since college. The apartment was almost empty. No furniture, no bed, no dishes. Just cardboard boxes stacked against the walls. Each one labeled in the same handwriting. Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. I opened the nearest one. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. All of me. Different years, different cities. Me unlocking a car. Me carrying groceries. Me standing in line at a coffee shop. Each one taken from a distance, always slightly off-center, like I wasn't supposed to notice. I staggered back, the box tipped, spilling photos across the floor. My foot caught another box and knocked it open. Not photos this time. Notebooks. Each one filled with writing. Pages and pages of my life. Conversations I'd had, places I'd gone, things I'd only thought about but never said out loud. I flipped one open at random. The page read, "He's reading this now." The door creaked behind me. Carl was standing in the hall. He didn't look surprised to see me there. He just smiled that faint, practiced smile. "It's easier if you let me keep track," he said. "You never remember everything." His eyes flicked to the notebook in my hands. "That one's tomorrow." I dropped it and ran. Down the stairwell, out into the street, not stopping until the night air burned in my lungs. When I looked back, the windows of the building were dark. Except one. His apartment. The light was on. And in the window, I saw him. Or maybe it wasn't him. Because this version of Carl looked exactly like me.
The first time I saw it, I thought it was a prank. I was walking home from a late shift, cutting across the empty lot behind the grocery store, when I noticed headlights glowing faintly through the mist. At first, I figured it was a delivery truck or maybe someone sleeping in their car. But as I got closer, I saw the shape. A school bus. It was old, the paint chipped down to rust, the yellow so faded it looked gray in the dim light. The windows were fogged from the inside, and the stop sign arm was still extended like it had frozen mid-motion. The strangest thing was, it wasn't parked near the road. It was angled in the far corner of the lot, away from everything, like it had rolled there on its own and stopped to wait. There hadn't been school buses in this town for years. Budget cuts. They sold them all off. And yet, this one sat there, idling softly. I didn't go near it. I just hurried past, convincing myself it was some abandoned bus someone towed here. By the next morning, it was gone. I should have left it at that. The next week, walking home again after midnight, it was there. Same corner, same faint rumble in the engine, same fogged windows. This time, the door was open. I stopped at the edge of the lot, every nerve in my body urging me to turn back, but something about it pulled me forward. Maybe it was the way the interior light glowed, weak and flickering like a lantern in the dark. I stepped closer. The smell hit me first. Not gasoline or oil, but damp fabric, mold, and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. From the doorway, I could see rows of seats stretching back into shadow. The overhead lights buzzed and flickered, never fully brightening. And there were shapes inside. Figures slouched in the seats, too still, too quiet. Their heads leaned against windows or tilted toward the aisle. I thought they were mannequins at first, or maybe piles of clothes. But then one of them moved. A hand. Small. Pressing faintly against the fogged glass. I staggered back. The bus engine coughed, louder now, like it had woken up. And then a voice came from the inside, high-pitched, wavering, childlike. "Sit down, you're late." I ran that night, didn't look back until I was safe inside my apartment. But the image burned in my mind. The pale shapes in the seats, the open doorway, the fogged glass with that small hand pressed against it. The next morning, I went back. Empty lot. No tracks, no bus. It didn't matter, because the night after that, when I turned onto my street, the bus was waiting at the curb in front of my building. Door open, engine idling, and this time, the fogged windows were clear enough to see dozens of faces inside, all turned toward me. The faces in the windows didn't blink, they didn't move, they just stared, eyes pale in the flickering light. Some looked like children, some older, but all had the same hollow expression, like masks stretched too thin. The door hissed open wider as I approached, though I hadn't intended to walk closer. My legs moved on their own, each step heavier than the last. The air around the bus was warmer, humid, carrying the faint smell of mildew and something metallic underneath. Inside, the rows of seats glistened with dampness, as if the fabric had been soaked in fog for years. The figures sat slumped, but when I placed my foot on the first step, their heads lifted in unison, dozens of eyes fixed on me. "Sit down," the voice said again, sharper this time, as if growing impatient. It wasn't one voice anymore, it was many, layered together, echoing in tones both childish and deep, overlapping in a way that made the words vibrate inside my skull. I gripped the cold metal pole by the door. The engine roared once, loud enough to rattle the glass. The bus wasn't waiting for me to decide. It was daring me. I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me with a finality that made my chest tighten. For a moment, nothing moved. The engine idled low, the bus rocking faintly. I stood in the narrow aisle, surrounded on both sides by still figures. Some leaned closer, their breath fogging the windows again, their mouths parted like they wanted to speak but couldn't. One figure in the third row turned its head too far, the neck bending with a faint crack, its lips peeled back in a grin too wide for its face. Another shifted sideways, and I saw its hands gripping the edge of the seat, fingers gray, nails blackened as though they'd been digging through soil. I staggered back, and every figure leaned forward at once as if connected by the same invisible string. "Sit. Down." The chorus of voices thundered through the bus, and the aisle seemed to stretch longer, like the seats multiplied while I watched. There was no end anymore, just row after row of expectant faces. I forced myself to move forward. The smell grew stronger with each step, the sweet rot wrapping itself around my throat. I dropped into a seat near the middle, the cracked vinyl sighing beneath me. Instantly, the bus lurched. The engine roared. Through the fogged windshield, the lot was gone, the street was gone. Outside, only endless darkness stretched in every direction, broken by flashes of pale light like distant lightning buried in the void. The figures sat back, their eyes never leaving me. Some smiled faintly, others tilted their heads, waiting. The bus rumbled on, carrying me deeper into nowhere. The child's voice returned, clearer now, whispering right by my ear. "You're on the list. You are always on the list." I turned, but the seat beside me was empty. The whisper came again, from the seat behind, then the one across the aisle. Then all around me, dozens of voices repeating the same words in perfect unison. You were always on the list. The windows pulsed with light, and I thought I saw shapes outside running alongside the bus, keeping pace in the void. Hands slapped the glass from the outside, too many to count, leaving streaks that didn't fade. I pressed my palms against my knees, trying to breathe, trying not to scream. And then, all at once, silence. The bus screeched to a halt. The figures turned their heads toward the door. Slowly, it creaked open. Through the mist, I could see a faint glow, a stop, a place waiting. And when my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't a place at all. It was my street, my building. But the windows of my apartment were lit, and I could see myself inside, unpacking groceries, humming softly like nothing was wrong. The voices whispered one last time, almost gentle now. Go home. The bus door opened wider, waiting for me to step out.
I had been driving for hours when I saw the sign. A cheap roadside motel, neon letters flickering red against the dark. Pine Grove Inn. The highway was nearly empty, the gas tank was low, and I was too tired to push through another 50 miles. So I pulled off, the gravel crunching under my tires as I parked beneath a buzzing street lamp. The office looked exactly like every other small-town motel office I'd ever seen. A faded welcome mat, a rack of outdated tourist brochures, the faint smell of coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. The clerk behind the desk barely glanced up from his newspaper when I walked in. "Checking in?" he muttered. "Yeah, just for one night." He flipped open a ledger, running a finger down the page. "Name?" "Daniel Reed." He froze. His eyes flicked up, narrowed, then dropped back to the ledger. "You already did." I laughed, assuming he'd misheard. "No, I just got here." The clerk turned the ledger toward me. My name was there, written neatly in blue ink. Room 6. Check-in time, 7:43 p.m. It was 7:59. My hand went cold on the counter. That's not possible. I've been driving since 5. I've never even been here before. The clerk shrugged, uninterested. "Look, you're Daniel Reed, right? That's what it says here. I gave you the key 20 minutes ago." "I didn't take any key." "Well, someone with your name did." A hollow feeling opened in my chest, but I forced a smile. "Okay, maybe it's just a mistake. Maybe someone else signed in with the same name." The clerk leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "Nope, ID matched." My mouth went dry. "You saw his ID?" "Driver's license, yeah. Picture looked like you too. You didn't say you had a twin, did you?" He said it casually, as if it were a joke, but the weight of his words settled like a stone in my stomach. I pressed harder. "Which room did you give him?" 6, around the back." The clerk slid the spare key across the counter. "Guess you forgot it the first time." The air outside felt heavier as I walked toward the row of dimly lit doors. The numbers were stenciled crookedly above each one. 4, 5, 6. The curtains in room 6 were drawn, but faint yellow light glowed from inside. I stood there, clutching the cold metal key, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might rattle the door. And then, from inside, I heard movement, a chair scraping, footsteps approaching the door. I held my breath. The knob turned. The door creaked open just enough to show a sliver of the room, and in the crack of light, I saw a face. My face. For a second, I thought the exhaustion was finally breaking me. Hallucination, trick of the light, anything but real. But the face in the doorway wasn't just mine. It was awake, alert, watching me with eyes sharper than my own. "Forgot something?" he asked. The voice was mine, too. Same tone, same rhythm, except colder. I froze, unable to answer. He smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind you give when you've already won an argument you haven't spoken yet. "Well, come in. No sense standing out there all night." The door swung wider. The room looked ordinary at first glance. Cheap wallpaper, single bed with stiff sheets, the hum of an old air conditioner in the corner. But there were details that made my stomach knot. My duffel bag sat on the chair by the window. My jacket was draped neatly over it. On the nightstand, my phone lay charging, its screen lighting up with my wallpaper when I glanced at it. "I didn't bring that," I whispered. "Yes, you did." He moved casually, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You've been here. You checked in. You unpacked. You don't remember?" I shook my head. "I've been driving all night." "No. I've been driving all night. You've been here." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at me like a teacher waiting for a student to admit the truth. "Do you ever wonder why you can't remember parts of your life?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "What are you talking about?" "Those gaps, the nights that blur, the times you wake up in places you don't remember falling asleep. Do you know where you were then?" He tapped his chest. "Here, with me." I took a step back toward the door, fumbling for the knob, but when I turned it, it didn't move. The lock wasn't jammed. The knob wasn't broken. It simply wasn't connected to anything. The door frame stretched into the wall, seamless, as if the room had never had an exit at all. I turned back, panic rising. He was standing now, closer, moving with the confidence that wasn't mine. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "When I checked in, it was supposed to be final. You were supposed to stay out there, driving forever, burning yourself out while I rested." I shook my head violently. "You're not me." He tilted his head, amused. "Then why do you know what I'm about to say next?" And I did. Word for word, before he spoke, I heard it in my own mind. "You're going to sit down now, and I'm going to lie down. And in the morning, one of us will wake up. Only one." The air thickened, pressing against my chest. I tried to speak, to yell, but my voice caught in my throat. He walked to the bed, stretching out like he'd done it 100 times before. My body moved against my will, sinking into the chair by the window, my hands resting on my knees just as his had a moment earlier. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, a message on the lock screen. "Welcome back, Daniel. Room 6 confirmed." The lamp flickered. My eyes grew heavy. And the last thing I saw before the dark swallowed me was him. My face. My smile.
closing his eyes as if he had finally earned his rest.
You thought you'd left them behind, but the truth is simpler. You never left at all.